the void within. The ancient floorboards groaned under Father Michael Donovan's feet as he ascended the winding staircase of the Cooper mansion. Each step sent shivers of foreboding through his worn body, a premonition of the horrors that awaited him. The air grew thicker, heavier with each floor he climbed, as if the very atmosphere was trying to crush the life out of him. At the top of the stairs, Sarah Cooper waited, her gaunt face a mask of desperation and fear. Dark circles hung beneath her bloodshot eyes, testament to countless sleepless nights. She clutched a rosary so tightly her knuckles had turned white. "Father," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Thank God you're here. It's getting worse." Donovan nodded grimly. He'd seen that look before, in the eyes of parents whose children were beyond salvation. But he couldn't afford to think that way. Not yet. "Take me to her," he said, adjusting the worn leather strap of the bag that held his sacred tools. Sarah led him down a long, dark hallway. The walls were lined with faded portraits, their eyes seeming to follow their progress. At the end of the hall stood David Cooper, a once strong man now reduced to a trembling shadow. "She's in there," David said, pointing to a heavy oak door. We had to restrain her." Donovan squared his shoulders and reached for the door handle. The metal was ice cold to the touch, despite the sweltering heat that permeated the rest of the house. As he turned the knob, a low, guttural growl emanated from within the room. The door swung open, revealing a scene straight from the depths of hell. The room was in chaos, furniture upended and shattered. Claw marks scored the walls and ceiling. And there, in the centre of the maelstrom, was Emily. The girl was strapped to a bed, her limbs contorted at impossible angles. Her nightgown was soaked with sweat and other, less identifiable fluids. As Donovan entered, her head snapped towards him, neck cracking audibly. Her eyes, once a soft brown, now blazed with an unholy amber light. "Ah, the lamb approaches the slaughter," Emily's voice rasped, a sound no human throat should be capable of producing. Her mouth split into a wide grin, revealing rows of sharpened teeth. "We've been waiting for you, Michael. So very long." Donovan felt the blood drain from his face. This was no ordinary possession. The evil that radiated from the girl was ancient, powerful. It knew him. With trembling hands, he reached for his crucifix. "In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit," he began. Emily's laughter cut him off, a sound like breaking glass and screaming souls. "Your God has no power here, priest," she snarled. "This is our domain now." As if to punctuate her words, the room plunged into darkness. The temperature dropped precipitously, Donovan's breath misting in the suddenly frigid air. From the shadows, something moved, something vast and unspeakable. Donovan realized with a sinking heart that he was woefully unprepared for what lay ahead. The exorcism hadn't even begun, and already he feared it was doomed to failure. Sister Agnes appeared in the doorway, her face pale but determined. She carried a large, ornate crucifix and a battered leather suitcase filled with holy water, blessed salt, and other sacred items. Her eyes widened as she took in the scene before her. "Mother of God," she whispered, crossing herself. Emily's head snapped towards the nun, a low hiss escaping her lips. "Another lamb for the slaughter," she sneered, her voice a cacophony of different tones speaking in unison. Donovan steeled himself, pushing aside his fear. He had a duty to perform, regardless of the cost. "Mr. and Mrs. Cooper, Sister Agnes, we must begin immediately. Whatever you hear, whatever you see, do not interfere. Do you understand?" Sarah nodded, tears streaming down her face. David pulled her close, his own expression a mask of anguish and terror. Sister Agnes moved to Donovan's side, her presence a small comfort in the face of the evil before them. The exorcist opened his prayer book, the pages seeming to turn of their own accord until they settled on the ritual of exorcism. As he began to recite the ancient Latin words, the atmosphere in the room shifted palpably. Exorcisamus te, omnis immundus spiritus, omnis satanica potestas, omnis incursio infernalis adversarii. Emily's body contorted violently, her back arching off the bed at an impossible angle. A scream tore from her throat, inhuman in its intensity and pitch. The windows rattled in their frames, and a fine coat of plaster drifted down from the ceiling. Donovan pressed on, his voice growing stronger with each word. Omnis legio, omnis congregatio et secta diabolica, in nomine et virtute, Domini nostri Jesu Christi. Suddenly, Emily's eyes rolled back in her head, leaving only the whites visible. When she spoke again, it was in a language Donovan had never heard before, guttural, ancient, and filled with malice. The temperature in the room plummeted further, frost forming on the windows and creeping across the floorboards. Sister Agnes began to sprinkle holy water around the bed, her lips moving in silent prayer. As the blessed droplets hit Emily's skin, they sizzled and steamed, eliciting howls of rage from the possessed girl. "You dare!" Emily roared, her voice deepening to an impossible bass. "You dare to challenge us, you insignificant speck!" The restraints holding Emily to the bed began to strain and fray. Donovan's heart raced as he realized they wouldn't hold for long. He reached into his bag, pulling out a small silver vial of chrism oil. As he uncapped the vial, the scent of sacred oil filled the air. Emily thrashed more violently, foam flecking her lips. "No!" she screamed, the single word echoing with the voices of countless tortured souls. Donovan approached the bed, vial held before him like a shield. "In the name of Jesus Christ, our Lord and Saviour, I command you to—" He never finished the sentence. With a sound like tearing fabric, the restraints gave way. Emily lunged forward, moving with inhuman speed and strength. Her hands, now tipped with razor-sharp claws, raked across Donovan's chest, shredding his cassock and drawing blood. The priest stumbled backward, dropping the vial. It shattered on the floor, the precious oil seeping into the cracks between the floorboards. Sister Agnes cried out in shock, and Sarah Cooper's scream pierced the air. Emily rose from the bed, hovering several inches above the ground. Her hair whipped around her face as if blown by an otherworldly wind. When she smiled, her mouth seemed to split her face in two, revealing row upon row of needle-like teeth. "Now, little priest," she said, her voice a symphony of terror, "shall we begin the true game?" Donovan, clutching his bleeding chest, realized with growing horror that this was no ordinary exorcism. The entity possessing Emily was unlike anything he had ever encountered. As the demon advanced on him, he understood that he had gravely underestimated the evil he faced. And now, it might be too late for all of them. The demon wearing Emily's face advanced on Father Donovan, each step leaving scorched footprints on the wooden floor. The air crackled with malevolent energy, and the stench of sulphur and decay filled the room. "What's wrong, Father?" The demon taunted, its voice a cacophony of whispers and screams. "Isn't this what you came for? To save the poor, innocent child?" Donovan stumbled backward, his hand pressed against the bleeding gashes on his chest. His mind raced, searching desperately for a strategy, a prayer, anything that might turn the tide. "Sister Agnes!" he called out, his voice strained. "The Saint Benedict medal! Quickly!" The nun snapped out of her terrified trance and fumbled in the suitcase. As her trembling hands closed around the ancient silver medal, a sudden force lifted her off her feet and slammed her against the wall. The suitcase's contents scattered across the floor. "Agnes!" Donovan cried out, but his attention was quickly reclaimed by the approaching demon. Emily's body contorted, limbs bending at impossible angles as she skittered across the ceiling like some monstrous spider. Her head rotated 180 degrees, fixing Donovan with a predatory stare. "Do you know what she begged for in those brief moments when I allowed her consciousness to surface?" the demon hissed. "She begged for death, priest. Sweet, merciful death." Sarah Cooper let out a heart-wrenching sob from the corner where she and David huddled. "Emily, baby, please," she whimpered. "Fight it. Come back to us." The demon's head snapped towards Sarah, a grotesque smile splitting Emily's face. "Mother dearest," it crooned, "shall I tell them your secrets? The dark thoughts you harbour, the sins you've committed?" Sarah's face drained of colour. David looked at his wife, confusion and fear warring in his eyes. Seizing the moment of distraction, Donovan lunged for the fallen St. Benedict medal. His fingers closed around it just as an invisible force lifted him into the air. He found himself face to face with the demon, suspended several feet above the ground. "Tisk, tisk," the demon tutted. "No cheating, Father. This is between you and me." With a flick of Emily's wrist, the medal grew white-hot. Donovan cried out in pain but refused to let go, the sizzle of burning flesh filling his nostrils. "In the name of Jesus Christ," he ground out through clenched teeth, "I command you to release this child." The demon laughed, a sound like shattering glass. "Your Christ has no power here, little man. This soul belongs to us now." Suddenly, Emily's body went rigid. Her eyes rolled back, and when they refocused, they were her own soft brown again. "Father," she sobbed, "help me. Please, it hurts. Make it stop." Donovan's heart clenched. Emily, listen to me. You must fight it. Your faith—" "Too late," the demon's voice returned, cruel and mocking. Emily's face twisted into a sneer. "She's ours, body and soul, and soon you'll all join her." With that, the invisible force holding Donovan released. He crashed to the floor, the impact driving the air from his lungs. The St. Benedict medal, now cooled, rolled away under the bed. As he struggled to his feet, Donovan became acutely aware of a change in the atmosphere. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to deepen and writhe, taking on vaguely humanoid shapes. Whispers, too quiet to make out but undeniably malevolent, filled the air. Sister Agnes stirred from her position against the wall, blood trickling from a gash on her forehead. "Father," she croaked, "the exorcism. We must complete it." Donovan nodded grimly, retrieving his prayer book from where it had fallen. But as he opened it, the pages burst into flames, crumbling to ash in his hands. The demon, once again perched on the ceiling, cackled with glee. "Did you really think it would be that easy, that your pathetic rituals could banish us?" As if in response to the demon's words, the writhing shadows began to coalesce, taking more solid form. Donovan watched in horror as dark, twisted figures emerged from the corners of the room, their eyes glowing with an infernal light. "What you fail to understand, priest," the demon continued, its voice now a chorus of countless tormented souls, "is that we are legion, and this is only the beginning." The shadow creatures advanced, their clawed hands reaching for the terrified humans. Sarah screamed as one brushed against her arm, leaving a trail of frost and decay on her skin. Donovan realized with growing dread that he had grossly underestimated the situation. This wasn't just a possession, it was an invasion, and if he couldn't find a way to stop it, The horror unleashed in this room would soon spread far beyond the walls of the Cooper mansion. With his holy weapons destroyed or out of reach, his ally injured, and the family he'd sworn to protect in grave danger, Father Michael Donovan faced the darkest moment of his life. As the shadows closed in and the demon's laughter echoed through the room, he understood that his next actions would determine not just the fate of Emily Cooper, but potentially the fate of the world itself. Donovan's mind raced, searching for any scrap of knowledge, any forgotten rite that might turn the tide. The shadow creatures advanced, their touch leaving trails of decay on the walls and floor. Sarah and David Cooper huddled together, whimpering in terror as the nightmarish forms drew ever closer. Suddenly, a memory surfaced, a forbidden text he'd once glimpsed in the Vatican's secret archives. It spoke of an ancient rite, one that could potentially bind a demon, but at a terrible cost. Donovan hesitated, knowing that if he proceeded he'd be violating every oath he'd ever taken as a priest. But as Emily's possessed form crawled across the ceiling, leaving gouges in the plaster with her clawed hands, he realized he had no choice. "Sister Agnes," he called out, his voice hoarse, "your rosary. I need it." The nun's eyes widened in understanding and fear. "Father, no. You can't mean to—" "It's the only way," Donovan cut her off, catching the rosary as she tossed it to him. He began to chant in a language far older than Latin, the words feeling like shards of glass in his throat. The demon's head snapped towards him, its eyes narrowing. "What's this?" it hissed. "Oh, you naughty priest, dabbling in the dark arts." As Donovan continued the chant, he felt a change in the air. The shadow creatures paused in their advance, seeming to waver and distort. But the cost of the ritual quickly became apparent. With each word, Donovan felt as if a part of his soul was being torn away. Blood began to trickle from his eyes and ears. Sarah Cooper, momentarily forgotten by the supernatural horrors, watched in horrified fascination. As Donovan chanted, she began to see flashes, glimpses of her own darkest secrets and sins. The times she'd wished Emily had never been born, the fleeting thoughts of infidelity, the deep-seated resentment towards her husband for his weakness in the face of their daughter's possession. David, too, was lost in a hell of his own making. He saw himself as he truly was, a coward who had failed to protect his family. He relived every moment he'd turned a blind eye to the early signs of Emily's possession, too afraid to face the truth. Sister Agnes clutched her crucifix, her lips moving in desperate prayer, but instead of comfort, she found only doubt. Where was God in this moment of ultimate evil? Had her entire life of devotion been for nothing? The demon, sensing the psychological torment of its victims, laughed with cruel delight. "Yes," it crooned, "let the truth of your miserable existence sink in. Your God has abandoned you. You are alone in the dark, and we are legion." Donovan stumbled, nearly falling as the power of the ritual racked his body. He could feel the demon's grip on reality weakening, but he knew he wouldn't be able to maintain the chant much longer. In a last, desperate gambit, he locked eyes with Emily, not the demon wearing her face, but the frightened girl trapped inside. "Emily," he gasped between words of the chant, "if you can hear me, fight. Fight with everything you have." For a moment, nothing happened. Then, Emily's body began to convulse violently. Her eyes flickered rapidly between their natural brown and the demon's fiery amber. She let out a scream that shook the foundations of the house, a sound of primal agony and determination. The shadow creatures began to dissipate, drawn back towards Emily's thrashing form. The demon's hold was weakening, but it wasn't going without a fight. Objects around the room started to levitate. Shards of broken furniture, splinters of wood, shattered glass, all spinning in a deadly vortex. "You think you can cast us out?" the demon roared, its voice shaking the walls. "We'll drag you all to hell first." The whirlwind of debris intensified, lacerating anything in its path. Donovan felt his skin being sliced open in dozens of places, but he refused to stop chanting. Sarah and David clung to each other, blood streaming from countless small cuts. Sister Agnes sheltered behind an overturned dresser, her habit in tatters. As Donovan neared the final words of the ritual, he felt a profound shift in the fabric of reality. The veil between worlds thinned, and for a brief, terrifying moment he could see beyond, into a realm of unimaginable horror and suffering. With the last ounce of his strength, Donovan spoke the final word of the chant. A shockwave of power exploded from him, slamming into Emily's possessed form. The demon let out a shriek of fury and pain as it was torn from the girl's body, a writhing mass of darkness and malevolence. For a moment, it hovered in the air, its form twisting and churning as it fought against the ritual's power. Then, with a sound like the collapsing of a dying star, it imploded. The shadow creatures vanished with it, leaving behind only the echoes of their unearthly screams. Emily's body fell limply to the floor. The unnatural storm of debris clattered to the ground, and an eerie silence fell over the room. Donovan collapsed to his knees, blood dripping from his nose and ears. He could feel the taint of the dark ritual coursing through him, a corruption that he feared might never fully leave him. But as he looked at Emily's still form, he prayed that the cost had been worth it. Sarah was the first to move, crawling towards her daughter with a heart-wrenching sob. "Emily! Baby, can you hear me?" As Sarah reached out to touch Emily's face, the girl's eyes snapped open. For a terrifying heartbeat, everyone held their breath, waiting to see which eyes would stare back at them, the warm brown of Emily or the fiery amber of the demon. Emily blinked once, twice. Tears welled up in her eyes, human eyes, filled with pain and relief and lingering terror. "Mom," she whimpered. "Dad? What happened? I was so scared." Sarah gathered her daughter into her arms, weeping uncontrollably. David moved to join them, his own tears cutting trails through the blood and grime on his face. Sister Agnes made the sign of the cross, her hands shaking. Is it over?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Donovan wanted to reassure her, to say that yes, the nightmare had ended. But as he looked around the devastated room, at the physical and psychological wreckage left in the wake of the exorcism, he knew that the true aftermath was only beginning. The demon was gone, but its shadow would linger. In the scars on their bodies and the darker scars on their souls. In the shattered faith and the terrible knowledge of what lurked beyond the veil of reality. In the corruption Donovan could feel taking root inside him, the price of the dark power he had wielded. As sirens wailed in the distance, someone, it seemed, had finally called for help. Donovan met Sister Agnes's questioning gaze. "The exorcism is over," he said heavily, "but I fear our ordeal has only just begun." 1 year later. The gravel crunched under Father Michael Donovan's feet as he made his way through the cemetery. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the scent of decaying leaves and the promise of an early winter. He paused before a simple headstone, its polished surface reflecting the weak sunlight. Sister Agnes Martin, 1975 to 2024. Faith is the bird that feels the light when the dawn is still dark. Donovan knelt, placing a small bouquet of white lilies at the base of the stone. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "I'm so sorry I couldn't save you." Sister Agnes had survived the exorcism, but the horrors she witnessed that night had shattered her faith. Unable to reconcile her experiences with her beliefs, she had taken her own life 3 months later. Her loss was a wound that Donovan knew would never fully heal. As he stood, he felt the familiar twinge in his chest, a reminder of the scars left by the demon's claws. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the spiritual torment he endured daily. The dark power he had wielded during the exorcism had left its mark on his soul. He could feel it even now, a constant whisper in the back of his mind, tempting him with promises of untold power. Donovan had left the priesthood shortly after the exorcism. How could he continue to serve God when he had violated every sacred vow? Instead, he had devoted himself to researching the occult, determined to understand the forces they had faced and find a way to protect others from similar horrors. As he left the cemetery, his phone buzzed with a text message. "Meet me at St. Mary's Hospital. It's happening again. Sarah Cooper." Donovan's heart raced as he hurried to his car. The Cooper family had been through hell in the past year. Emily had required extensive therapy to deal with the trauma of her possession. Sarah and David's marriage had nearly collapsed under the weight of the secrets and resentments exposed that night. They had all been trying to rebuild their lives, but it seemed the past wasn't done with them yet. At the hospital, Donovan found Sarah pacing outside the emergency room, her face pale and drawn. "It's David," she said without preamble. He's been hearing voices, seeing things. The doctors say it's a psychotic break, but I know it's more than that. It's him. The demon. It's back." Donovan felt a chill run down his spine. "Where's Emily?" he asked, dreading the answer. "At home with her aunt. She's been having nightmares again. Sleepwalking. I didn't want to worry her about David, but..." Sarah's voice broke. "What if it's not over? What if it never will be?" Donovan placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, even as his mind raced with terrible possibilities. Had the demon truly been banished, or had it merely gone into hiding, biding its time? Was David's condition a result of lingering trauma, or something far more sinister? As if in response to his dark thoughts, Donovan felt the corrupt power within him stir. For a moment, he could almost hear the demon's mocking laughter echoing in his mind. "I don't know if it's over," he admitted to Sarah, "but whatever's happening, we'll face it together. I won't let it destroy your family. Not again." Sarah nodded, tears in her eyes. As they turned to enter the hospital, Donovan caught a glimpse of his reflection in the glass doors. For a split second, he could have sworn his eyes flashed with an amber light. He blinked, and it was gone. But the fear remained. The exorcism had ended, but the true battle for his soul, for the Coopers, for the very fabric of reality, was far from over. The void within him whispered of horrors yet to come, and Donovan knew that this was only the beginning of a much darker journey. As he stepped into the hospital, ready to confront whatever nightmares awaited, a chilling thought occurred to him. In his quest to save others from the darkness, had he inadvertently become its agent? And if so, could anyone truly be safe in his presence? The automatic doors hissed shut behind him, sealing him in with his doubts and fears. Whatever lay ahead, one thing was certain. The shadows that had been unleashed that fateful night were far from finished with any of them. The end, or merely a prelude to greater horrors.